I joined Yieldmo in February because I saw that the company had really overcome some of the fundamental challenges that face the industry right now in programmatic. I think that the vast majority of the industry is focused for years on the use of audience data as currency, and the systems in place are primarily focused on using that audience data to target users and to really focus on the performance of advertising campaigns based on the data that's been collected about users over decades. And what I saw from Yieldmo was something very different. The company was founded by the former leadership team from Quigo, which had been acquired by AOL, I think in 2018. They were a real innovator in the contextual space. They had very significant investments and innovations in that space that really changed the way that companies thought about contextual. And as a result, they had a tendency to focus from a technology perspective on driving changes in the way that ad inventory itself was categorized, and also using capabilities around ad inventory that were different than the way that a lot of companies focused on the audience capabilities. And as a result, they have the ability to automatically curate inventory that is very significant. It can drive very significant advertiser performance on both addressable inventory that's highly in demand when using audience targeting technologies, but also on non-addressable inventory. And that's a really big difference. And if we look at the way that the ecosystem has shifted over the last few years, and we go all the way back to the beginning, we saw the rise. I've seen sort of 6 waves of advertising technology over the years. And it started with publisher ad servers, and then advertiser ad servers, ad networks, really driving the initial remnant inventory monetization. And then we saw the rise of programmatic, which was really about liquidity and automation, and then ultimately about optimization, and eventually about gaining privileged access to inventory. And then the last few waves have been much more interesting from a broad ecosystem perspective, because we saw that as programmatic grew, there was a lot of fraudulent ad activity that grew in the space. So the sort of 5th wave of the ecosystem was really around cleaning up that fraud and building out accountability capabilities. And now we're at an interesting crossroads where privacy and privacy-related issues are really at the forefront. And we're seeing that between government regulation and changing corporate policies in the tech ecosystem, that this ability that we've all sort of taken as constant to target users and to track users and to build user profiles is really going away. It won't go away completely, but we're seeing already we're at about half of inventory is addressable and the other half is non-addressable. And now we're seeing that with increases in both regulation and corporate policies, that amount of non-addressable inventory, the stuff that can't be targeted to users, is growing, and will probably grow to as high as between 70 and 90% of all inventory, depending on which sources that are looking at that data. So, the opportunity for Yieldmo is very significant in that this curation capability that has been developed that allows us to really drive performance against various KPIs that advertisers care about, has been developed over many years with very significant investment. The platform checks all of the basic boxes that I care about as a person that was coming in. I want to make sure that that the systems scale, that they're going to be able to handle internet scale. And this is a team that had already previously built a massive scale auction engine for contextual, and had really built the capability around driving this curation technology in a way that was very significant. And we're seeing increases in performance that are averaging over 80%, and that are growing significantly quarter over quarter. That every few quarters, as we add more signals and more capabilities around optimization, we're seeing significant improvements in the results of the curation. And that curation system is really the thing that caught my attention, and the reason that I ended up joining the company. I mean, besides the incredible team and the fundamentals of the business being really strong, that was the thing that I saw was very, very differentiated, and that would allow us to really help publishers monetize all of their inventory, including the half of inventory that's not really being touched by the programmatic ecosystem today, and that would help advertisers get more performance. Another parallel that I thought was super interesting is that my first startup back in the late 90s was one of the early rich media companies. So I've spent now decades of time really thinking about advertising creative, and the way that creative and technologies and techniques like dynamic creative optimization could drive performance. And when Yieldmo first started, they started out by building out a lot of those raw capabilities around advanced creative formats and driving performance. And they added over time, and really from that creative capability, they added harnesses for data collection around creative formats, around the inventory itself, so that we could collect information about the behavior of the ad inventory, again, not the behavior of the users. And that allowed us to really build a really strong set of interlocking technologies that really drove an immense amount of performance for advertisers, and has been the thing that's driving a lot of the interest from publishers as we help them drive yield on their inventory, and roll out increasing capabilities quarter after quarter.